Hi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is October 9th, 2014 at 9 p.m. Central European Time, and this is Turn 2 episode number 38 with Frodan, Firebat, and D2, two of the four North American representatives that will be at BlizzCon later this year. Gnimsh is currently in Sweden getting ready for the Game Cup that'll be happening in a little bit over 24 hours. So he'll be sitting this one out once again. But don't worry, we've got plenty of great guys on the show. So today our topics is going to include talking about the North American Road to BlizzCon. We'll talk about the decks that these guys brought, as well as some of the metagame implications of what people were being able to bring for their deck lists. We'll talk about some other tournaments and the rest of October, and even show some fun community stuff. And of course, at the very end of the show, we'll do Q&A, where you guys can submit questions for D2 or Firebat, whether it's about their personal lives or about Hearthstone. So to start things off, I'd like to introduce our guests for today. We first have James Cost, also known as Firebat. That's not your full last name, is it?
No, it's just abbreviated. I'm probably going to get it changed to that because my real last name is Kostasich, and people have trouble pronouncing it. It's awkward.
Okay, well, I guess it'd be much easier if it's just James Cost. But
yeah.
First, introduce yourself, Firebat, for those who have never heard of you, whether people are watching live or on VOD.
I'm Firebat. I qualified for BlizzCon. I started as an open tournament player, played a lot of open tournaments, and grinded my way up through that. I haven't really streamed that much, starting to get a little bit of a following of that. I think I'm most known for Stone Tusk Boar. That's probably my most known thing is Stone Tusk Boring Strife Crow with my Miracle Rogue. And being off by 1 damage lethal at the end. And everyone was like, why no South Sea deckhand? But I had to go with the board control.
Yeah, good stuff. That was on Deck Wars Season 2 Finals. If you guys didn't get a chance to, it was hilarious. And, of course, Firebat is also a that's posted several of his decks on the subreddit for Hearthstone. Most recently, his rogue deck that featured Alex Straza, which a player even used in the America's Qualifier Terray, which we'll talk later on. In the meantime, we don't want to take the entire spotlight away from the other guest that's also on the show. We have D2 from DKMR. Go ahead and introduce yourself, buddy.
So yeah, I'm D2 from DKMR, as Frodan said. What's my background? I basically started a little bit after the closed beta came out. I begged for a key like everyone else. And I don't know, I'm one of the first members of DKMR. So one of the original members.
Oh, okay.
And then, so yeah, I was there before even Firebat was there. I don't know if you guys know that Firebat was once on DKMR.
Wait, Firebat was on DKMR? What?
Yeah, I got kicked off. So
for what? Oh my god, I had no idea. This is real good juicy gossip time.
It wasn't good enough, man. I couldn't do it.
So in the time I was on DKMR, Firebat has been on and off and forgotten that he was on DKMR. So anyway, so I've been there for a long time, is the point. And so yeah, I was pretty busy with work and other stuff. And just recently I've been really just putting more time into it and getting far in tournaments, and that's how I was able to win first NESL to qualify for the Phase 1 qualifiers, and then I went 7-2 in that, and then most of you guys saw me in the Phase 2. So, yeah.
Cool. Right on, man. People don't know much about you guys' background too much. Have you played other competitive games whatsoever prior to Hearthstone? Because you mentioned how long you've been playing, but were you involved in any pro scene or competitive scene in the past?
I have never been involved in any real pro scene. I played Brood War, almost competitively, but not competitively enough to make more than a couple $100. So, nope. It's my first real competitive game.
Wait, so you played Brood War? Did you play on the IC Cup ladders?
Yeah. I got A- on IC Cup. I was one of the only white people to reach A-. So, hooray, white people! But couldn't compete with the Asians. There's no way. Couldn't happen. So had to give up that dream.
And so yeah, I guess you were a Terran player too, because Firebat is the name.
No, are you kidding me? You need 300 APM to play Terran. I wanted to be a Terran player.
Well, you played Protoss? Is that what?
Yeah, dude, that's the only race you could play for white. Are you kidding me? What?
Wow.
Ain't nobody got that APM.
Well, Idro was a really famous Terran player from Brew. This is not a StarCraft podcast, but we're diving into some esports history there. What about you, Daniel? Did you have any competitive gaming background prior to Hearthstone?
No, no, pretty much none at all. I was just basically a fan. As far as like being competitive and stuff, it's like tennis and I guess you could say cello as well. Like when I was a kid, it's pretty good. Um,
Competitive cello.
not competitive, but like
The Cello
I would
Wars.
I would enter to like you get into orchestras and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
There's competitions too. So, but I don't know. That's basically the extent of it. And then just like I don't know, I was always a fan of esports, and then Hearthstone seems like something I could actually like be one of the best at. So that's why I'm going into it.
All right, cool, yeah, and so it sounds like you guys come from a mix of different backgrounds. That's what's cool. Every time I meet a player that's qualified, they each have their own story. It's very rare that you see like a guy that's played like CCG's 20 years and then they just make it through. There's one of those, and then there's always the guys who just said, "Oh yeah, like I got a beta key randomly from a dude, and I just really liked the game and I started learning more." And we'll talk more about how things have developed overall, but I want to get to know a little bit more of your road to BlizzCon because that's what we're doing throughout Turn 2 in the past couple weeks. We want to feature more of these guys that you'll be seeing at the finals. More than just Kalento and Strifecrow, where everyone knows a lot about their decks, their personalities. We want to get to know some of the other guys. So the first thing I want to ask directly as we transition to our first topic of the day, which was the ESL event that we just went to in the Hammerstein Ballroom, was that it was both of your first live tournament experiences as far as Hearthstone is concerned. I don't think I've seen you guys ever, especially with the viewership that we had, 100,000 people watching online, and there was a decent amount of people on the first day of the event watching you guys play. How was it your first experience there being overall? Were you guys nervous at all, Firebat?
Yeah, it was like crazy nerve wracking, especially since I have like a past with nerves being an issue. So, like going into it, like crazy nerve wracking. And I didn't know what to expect at first. And then the first day got there, and I got to go to the venue at night, the first night, which was actually like really good just to get like a feel for the environment and stuff. Really helped out a lot. And then got picture taken, and then I don't know, like sort of just like got up there, took a deep breath, and went in and managed not to make any dumb mistakes. So I was really proud of myself for not letting nerves get the best of me. But it was really tough. So
Yeah, no doubt. D2, I think people would definitely say some nerves bled through. Actually, you're one of the more emotive players, at least in the physical aspect of it. Whenever things were going good, you were fist pumping. Whenever things were going bad, you looked noticeably shaken. Was that just for show, or is that just like the emotions that were pumping through you as you were playing?
A little bit of both. I knew the cameras were on, so I mean, anytime I could like play it up a little bit more, I would. But I also was definitely feeling the emotions that I was showing, you know. So like when something, I mean, every time I won a game, I was pretty happy about it. Every time I lost, it was like pretty disappointing. I guess in that sense, I wasn't like I I wasn't like shaking my head when I lost, but I was feeling pretty down about it. But after I made that pretty big misplay on in game 2 of against Dear Jason, that was like really embarrassing. So that was why I was just like, oh my god. So yeah, that was part of it. And yeah, it was. I mean, it was pretty nerve wracking. Actually, it was weird because I was really nervous going into the event. Like just a few days, like the days before the event, I couldn't like really sleep because I was just like thinking about the entire time. But once I got up there, like I don't know, just like ran a bunch of random stuff in my life where I've played in tennis tournaments, and I've soloed with orchestras. So like I'd been on like the big stage before, kind of. So I was kind of used to that experience, but it was definitely nerve wracking. So yeah.
Right, right. And you even mentioned to me prior to the show that you were on an elimination game. What was it, 6 times throughout the event? Like you could have lost, you could have gotten kicked out like
Well,
6 times, and you won every single time when it mattered the most, right?
well, actually, just once in phase 2, but in phase 1,
Oh,
I just
okay,
won.
okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I was just counting together, like if you count all the times that. So in phase 1, I was down 1-2 in one of the best of fives, and I was down 0-2 another best of five. Actually, the 0-2 was the ant. Um, and then I was obviously it was 2-2 against Chalky. So if you count those up, it's 6 times that I was one game away from being eliminated.
Yeah,
scary.
pretty intense. But you've done it, and you're one of the guys who people don't know about, but has been around for a while, and so they probably are curious as to get to know you guys more. So I guess my first question to follow this up was, how did you guys specifically prepare for the event? I know people have different training regimens. Like, if you ask Colento a few weeks ago, he says all he does is really play ladder, think about it, think about Hearthstone himself, and craft his own things. I want you guys to talk about like how you guys prepared, who helped you prepared the most, and then like what were some of the keys you felt like were successful, or why you succeeded for this event.
Well, for me, preparing, I like the pen and paper sort of spreadsheet approach. So I like make deck lists, and then I talk to people, and I talk to like all the people that I think are the experts of certain classes. So like my friend Purple Drank, I think he's one of the best at like teching decks to specific matchups. So I run all of my decks by him. And then Grindstone, he's kind of fallen out of the scene a little bit, but at once time he was known as like the best shaman player. So for all my shaman advice or whatever, I always talk to him and get his opinions on things. And I talk with like Draven, Eversiction, and there's like lots and lots, as many people as I can, honestly, that I can
Right.
like trust. And I have all of them like run it by, because a lot of people, like players, only play one deck on ladder, like one specific class, and they're just like experts at it. And I like to think of myself as a really well-rounded player, so I like to try and get a lot of expert opinion on things. But then at the end of the day, it's of course like my call to go with it. So then I put all of the decks in spreadsheets, and then I try and like figure out the advantages and disadvantages of every single deck, then have different mulligan charts for every single deck to then compare when each deck takes tempo and
Wow.
how they take tempo, and then compare that against all the decks in the meta that I think I'm going to play, and then make a big ass spreadsheet comparing like all of the specific decks against each other to see in which weaknesses and which holes I'm going to have in my lineup. And then I do that like twice, and then come up with a lineup and make sure I have two counters for everything, because my idea of my lineup was I really wanted to have this most flexible ban as possible, so no matter what their lineup was, I didn't have to ban one specific thing, so I could just ban whatever their strongest deck was. So I try to counter as many things as I could and have as few holes as possible in the lineup. So
Hmm.
that's
And
what I
then you
did.
said, "I'm gonna play Zoo."
And that,
So
well,
that's
well, the thing
the
going into it, Hyped only had one counter for Zoo. Like people are saying, his priest deck was a counter for Zoo. His
Yeah.
priest deck was too high curve to consistently counter Zoo. Like he lost to Zoo twice with it in the tournament. It did not beat Zoo.
Yeah.
So he didn't have a counter for Zoo except for Freeze Mage, so I got that out of the way, and then tried to win the 50-50 with Shaman against Druid, so I didn't have to deal with that, because Druid can beat anything with the right draw. So I tried to knock that out of the way, and then that didn't work, so I was like, oh
Yeah.
god, here goes the Zoo, and just hoped. So I was really hoping to knock the Druid, and it was really close, but he top decked me like 3 times, and then he made the right plays. Like he took the right read on the fact that he had to combo at that point, and that he had to push for the damage, and did that perfectly. So he got the draws and played it perfectly, so he was able to win that matchup even when I was like super far ahead. So
Well,
head to Zoo.
it's more than the Zoo. It was the fact that you also had an interesting take on Hunter with the snake trap oriented. It's a little different that what people normally come to expect with, especially the Undertaker Hunter, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But I want to hear more about also D2's preparation style before we get more into like deck lists and metagame of how everything panned out tournament wise. So go ahead, D2.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty similar, not to the extent of making like multiple spreadsheets and each mulligan band and stuff like that, or mulligan band, Matt Mulligan's like what or like tempo plays or whatever that. But I mean, obviously, I was thinking about which deck counters which deck and what I can go with, and just talking to teammates a lot, and generally just pulling out my hair like several times over. And it's just in the end, I kind of just went with stuff that was basically just solid overall. Like the fast druid deck is just really solid. Handlock can basically like handlock can be anything. Well, except for Hunter, Hunter can be anything, and druid can be anything. So I went with that. And my last look was going to be priest, but then I realized that I was just going to die to aggro too hard, especially if they ban my Hunter. So I switched from priest to like a miracle rogue with a couple of earthen rings teched in, and then I switched that. And then we were worried about like handlock, so I switched that to shaman. But then the shaman, if I wanted to beat aggro, I couldn't actually beat handlock, so I decided, okay, I'm just gonna make this good against aggro and screw handlock. I'm just gonna ban handlock, even if there's hunter, because my shaman can beat it. And so yeah, so basically I ended up with like 3 really solid classes. Even though the handlock dies to hunter, like I had 3 solid classes, and then a shaman which would beat aggro, which I figured a lot of the NA players would run.
Did you anticipate so many people bringing Zoo, both of you guys, as a meta game call? Because Handlock was the super dominant deck in Europe for a while, and people were really high on Jiraxis making a comeback, and they thought Handlock was back in vogue. Were you guys anticipating Zoo being as prevalent as it was? And to follow up on that, did you expect it to be as dominant as it was, considering the metagame call?
Yeah, I thought Zoo was going to be huge, especially with the Era Hunter list being released. Like at the towards the end of that ladder season, Era hit like number one legend with a Hunter deck that was like super vulnerable to Zoo, and then tons of people on the ladder started grinding back up with Zoo, and everyone was like seeing Zoo as like super powerful. So I thought everyone's like natural Hunter counter was going to be Zoo if they weren't planning on banning Hunter. And then like a lot of the Chinese players didn't get to see the end of the ladder season and see how powerful like the Hunter still was even after the nerfs. So I didn't know that they were going to bring Zoo as much, but I figured like everyone else that didn't go to China that saw the impact of Hunter was going to bring Zoo. So that Hunter list was like tailored just to always beat Zoo. Like
You're
if
saying
you've
your
tried
Hunter
it,
list, right?
yeah, it's actually Death Star's list. We sort of collaborated on a lot of our decks, but yeah, that list just destroys Zoo like 90% of the time, if not more. Like
Wow.
ridiculously hard counters Zoo, much better than Priest.
Well, that's pretty sick. Did you feel the same way, D2? Because you're the one who brought Handlock. Were you anticipating Zoo to be as common as it was?
I didn't know how much Zoo there was going to be, but it was definitely something you had to take into account, especially considering, I mean, a lot of the players that play, and a lot of players in NA are really going to run Zoo, particularly like, Chalky and, I mean, just like, well, basically a lot of the players there and always run Zoo. So, I mean, whether or not it was going to be 80% Zoo of the warlocks there, or 20% whatever. Like if you get in a group and they all run Zoo, then you're basically screwed if you're not prepared for it. So I mean, I wasn't really sure how much of each was going to be run, because each person's or separate player like to do things differently. Like
Mhm.
Strife not really going to run Zoo no matter what. So you
Oh, that's
basically
what you
have,
think.
well, maybe. I mean, maybe like a 10% chance that Strife runs Zoo, but
Yeah.
but I mean, everyone's their own individual, and like they're gonna do what they think is strong, and it's not always gonna be what's on the ladder. So I wasn't sure it was gonna be Zoo, but it was definitely something that you had to take into account.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's talk a little bit more about specific decks that were really strong in the tournament, or at least made waves that people I'm sure are curious about. So, I think the first topic we can talk is directly what you were just saying, Firebat, where you feel like your Hunter is 90% favored against Zoo. Can you explain a little bit why? And in fact, I don't know if we have a copy of the deck list whatsoever, but just talk a little about some of the elements in the Hunter of why you feel like it's so strong option against Zoo.
Because you get to really capitalize on Snake Trap, which causes them to not be able to trade with your minions without taking a huge tempo loss. So if you get one of the Snake Traps or the Mad Scientist early, then like they can't take the favorable trades. So then you get to develop things like Direwolf Alpha, and then they have to ignore it. Then your Unleash gets huge value, or you get to develop like Knife Juggler, and if they don't have Soulfire, they have to ignore it because the Snake Trap is up. And the more stuff they ignore, you just accumulate all this power on the board and the Knife Juggler, and then you get to take all of your favorable trades. Then they try and race you, right? So then after they try and race you, they expand their board a ton because they're Zoo, and then you unleash them and kill them because you're Hunter. Like you do damage way more efficiently with your hero power. Then you eventually draw your unleashes and clear the board, or just
Mhm.
straight up kill them with the damage you get from the dogs.
So then I guess
So
people are also wondering then what's the best way to beat this kind of hunter, especially if you're gearing it to be strong against aggro, and people are seeing a lot of it on like say a ladder, right? Because that's the most applicable way for people to start trying out this deck list. So how do people start tackling this hunter problem that they might see a lot on ladder D2? Or
uh,
is it even possible to take it down?
I mean, I would
so
say,
oh,
or
sorry.
sorry, you can go ahead if you want.
Oh, I was just gonna talk about like the hunter like uses snake trap as its main like sort of way to take tempo and board control. So if you're not directly trading with their minions and you use things like Shadow Word Pain or Backstab or SI7 or Deadly Poison or not Deadly Poison or like Eviscerate to remove the minions, and you can avoid tripping the snake trap for as long as possible while still developing minions, then that 2 mana investment for the snake trap is going to be completely useless.
Hmm.
So that's basically like me spending 2 mana to play something that does nothing if you don't have to physically trade with the minions. So it's
True
like
that.
really hard countered by removal heavy decks, but a lot of people have been cutting removal recently. Like all of the priest decks have been cutting like Holy Smites, and the rogue decks have been getting slower and skipping out some of the removal spells for other things. So it just kind of fit in the meta and could fade out of style easily with just
Mhm.
simple changes.
Yeah, I was
What
gonna say something
about
similar as far as like, I mean, not necessarily removal, but if you say if you play like a druid and you get a wild growth, you get a head, you don't even have to deal with the snake trap. You just go to face, and then once you trigger the first, or you attack face the first time, you realize it's not freezing. Then you just keep going to face, and if you have the tempo, then they don't have to. Like a lot of times, that you have to deal with druid's minions, right? Like, like which is something that in particular like Admiral realized like pretty early on. Like you just go to face and they have to deal with you. You don't have to trade with them at all. So that's like another way to just go around the snake trap. You don't have to even deal with their minions.
So then what about like non-snake trap hunters who just run the normal freezing traps? They get Undertaker, Leopard Gnome, Web Spinner starts. That's basically the hot topic nowadays, right? Like, how do you deal with Undertaker? Does it even deserve a nerf? I know Ben Brody was saying that they're not looking at changing Undertaker anytime soon. Do these Hunter Undertakers or Zoo Undertakers or does Undertaker need to change whatsoever? And if not, what's the best way to tackle it?
Undertaker. In Hunter, I think it's
Besides having your
broken.
own Undertaker, right? Is that
In Hunter, I think it's broken. Like, I don't know. There's having the web spinner as an option and Leopard Gnome as like options with it. It makes it like way too strong early. But then again, like the risk is it doesn't do much late game. But like the huge tempo push that you get early allows you to just out damage your opponent and just kill him too fast. So I think with Hunter, it's like too strong. Something needs to change. Not really sure like what, but maybe just make it only be able to get buffed once a turn. Because like it's really just the one drop buff cards that really like punish you because you just buff it like twice in one turn and then trade up and there's nothing they can do. But with Zoo, I think it's fine. Like Zoo doesn't have the web spinners as the other one drop death rattle. So like the death rattles are a little bit clunkier. So it's not as much value. Because when you think of it in terms of value, like a two drop death rattle guy that gives a +1/+1 is not nearly as strong card wise as a one drop that gives a +1/+1. I don't know. It's the way I think of it.
okay? D2.
Um, I think it's gonna be nerfed at some point. It's like because it's not like a mana worm, for instance, where if it gets too big, it'll just start taking way too much damage. But you can always like to wrath a mana worm, right? But the Undertaker sometimes they get so big, they get 4, 5, 5, 6, where you literally have to. I mean, you can't even. It's not. Sometimes some classes can't even kill it. It's like not even possible. So I think one of the they might nerf it to just add attack potentially,
Okay.
instead of just the health. But I mean, yeah, I mean Undertaker's pretty ridiculous, and yeah, I mean I guess you go the way that Firebat said as well, where you just buff it once a turn. Because and the other thing I was gonna say, Firebat said like it's not good in the late game, but even in the late game, if you have like a nice curve setup, and then you get like say you're just a normal hunter, and you're going turn one leopard on turn two something, and then you have by the time you get to turn 6 or 7, you still have three or four cards remaining, and then you top deck an Undertaker. You go Undertaker and then double triple death rattle, and you have a one mana Yeti basically, you know. So it's like even in the late game, if you have other cards to pair with it, you can automatically make it like this huge tempo play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Undertaker can be super powerful at all stages of the game. The worst is just when you're just drawing one or two cards though as Hunter and you have only one card, and then it's like a 1/2. But even then, like it's still just like this weird impeding threat that you have to take care of. So I can identify with that. I think people are just really curious as to, does Undertaker deserve a nerf? That's really the big question, as you saw on your screen.
Well, the
Um,
main thing is
I
though,
don't know.
it's like not healthy for the game, I don't think. Because it promotes a sort of game state where like drawing Undertaker early gives you such a huge advantage in the game, and not drawing it early, then you're at a disadvantage. So
Right.
then like the games can be decided on like turn 3. So I don't think you want a game state where like Ramp Druid and then Undertaker starts and just these snowball starts to just get out of control really quick. I think that you should try and like limit those as much as possible. So there's as much player to player interaction throughout the game. And Undertaker sort of takes away from that, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, the upside of Undertaker's like too good to pass up, right? And even
Yeah.
if there is some negative downsides on the late game, it's just sometimes you just get easy wins because of your start, and then your opponent can't respond to it. I got an
Yeah.
interesting question though from Reels. He said, "What about are people just not responding to it though with how their decks are being built? Like they're still stuck in old mindset. Like for example, like you pointed out how priests are cutting a lot of removal. Um, what happens to cards like Shadow Word Pain that pretty much should be able to deal with any kind of Undertaker start,
Yeah.
no matter what
Shadowward
happens to the
Pain.
priest?
It deals with Undertaker and it deals with Sludge Belcher. Like, it's just crazy spot right now. But the problem is Priest is like not really all the way there yet, consistency wise. I don't think. Like it's just missing like one or two more new cards that'll make it just consistent enough. Because right now there's just so many weak cards in Priest and so many cards that are just like you're not doing it. You're a Priest,
right? Like
yeah.
Lightwell or Mass Dispel, like
Yeah,
those
like,
cards. They're good
just
for the
like
gimmick decks.
one more tool in the toolbox, and then you can make a consistent Priest. Then we could start seeing like people really get punished by like Shadow Word Pain and stuff.
The problem with gearing your deck towards just being able to deal with Undertaker starts is that you will never be able to beat a control deck if you do that. Like, for instance, my Shaman deck is good against Hunter decks because there's a lot of early minions and a lot of early, obviously the standard Shaman spells, but it cannot beat a control deck. It just completely flops. And even against like mid-range decks, you have to get way ahead and hope you draw Bloodlust or else you cannot win. So, I mean, it's just kind of unreasonable, I think, to basically force your deck to deal with one type of deck and then just like, just throw all the other matches.
Yeah. That's what I did with my Priest deck in the qualifier. If anyone like was able to see the Priest deck, like there's 2 Holy Fires, which were like the highest cost cards, and then there was just like Sludge Belchers, Senjins, Holy Novas, Zombie Chows. I didn't even have Undertakers, but just the Zombie Chows just for the 2/3 body early, and every heal spell in double Shadow Madness. Like definitely destroyed Undertaker Hunter, but in any control matchup, it just like you hang in there for a little while and then you just stopped having stuff because there was no end game.
Yeah, you gassed out much quicker than you would. But then people weren't bringing as many control decks as you thought. One of the very few control decks that you saw was Hype's Mage deck, or I don't know if it was actually hyped, but Tempo Storm brought the Freeze Mage. Did you guys think that was a good metagame call? In fact, it was banned out from a certain phase of the tournament onwards. It just no one wanted to play against Freeze Mage, and that's a really interesting choice because we didn't see Mage played much, but when it was even available to be played, it was vetoed by their opponents. So was that a really good metagame call from Temple Storm, or was it just unfamiliarity? Like, I don't want to deal with this because I'm not sure if I'm prepared for it.
I thought the deck was sick. Yeah.
I thought it was good. Sorry. I'm gonna go first this time. No, I thought it was a good call. The Freeze Mage definitely, because of the fact that no one's gonna bring Warrior, right? Like you guys said, there's only 2 Warriors inside in the entire tournament. So it's kind of like I forgot who said. Maybe it was like Admirable or something, or maybe it was like maybe it was Artosis or something. But people were talking about. Or maybe it was real. Sorry. Anyway, people were talking about it might have been like the meta gets faster, so then people might counter the meta that's coming by going with control decks, right? So basically that's what they did. They figured there's going to be people are going to be playing aggro, so instead of there's not going to be as many warriors, so that they don't have to worry about warriors, so they could just play their Freeze Mage without having to worry. And that was a pretty good call in my opinion. The only problem was as Firebat mentioned earlier, he didn't have another deck to efficiently deal with Zoo, so that was basically his downfall. Or for Hyped, I mean.
Yeah, but the Freeze Mage deck was like nuts. Like even like double Cone of Cold and all the anti-aggro stuff. For the amount of aggro that was at that event, they like hit it spot on. Like just like absolutely sick. I wish I would have thought of that deck and brought that deck because it was actually like crazy good. So probably like the scariest deck of the tournament was that deck coming out of it because it happened to be such aggro based meta, and that deck just like crushed aggro. Like losing to that deck is just soul crushing too, because you just sit there getting frozen for like a half hour and then you die and there's absolutely nothing you can do. Like if you start off your round in the tournament losing to that, you're just like sad like the rest of it. It's so sad.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I don't know if Hyped even lost with it on the first day, but from that point on, I don't think we saw a single Mage game being played. Every time it was against Tides or Hyped, it was banned out. But not really sure if it's ladder viable whatsoever, especially since Hunters are still out. Is it still the case where if Hunters are out there in the ladder, you can't play Freeze Mage no matter how it's built?
If Hunter's playing Lotheb and Double Flare, then it's going to be really hard to play Freeze Mage. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like borderline impossible, especially just because they have the consistent damage output. So Yeah, it's gonna be really rough. But if Hunter starts getting like beaten down by Priest, then maybe it'll become viable if you want to spend like 45 minutes a game beating Priest. But you know, so I don't know if it's ever gonna be like a truly super viable and good for grinding. But I'm sure there's gonna be a meta where it can be playable.
Sure.
Just find the
Okay.
right pocket, find the right hour to play it in when there's
Yeah,
no like
When there's a lot of
unless you're,
shaman bots, is that the way to
yeah.
kill
yeah,
them?
yeah, pretty
Farm the
much.
shaman bots. There you go.
Although if you find a
Sounds
lot of
good.
shaman bots, you just go priest and just like laugh. And
Right.
Just
then
go Hunter. Hunter with
BM
double
the
unleash.
bots. Fair enough.
Yeah, actually, that's what was really funny. I saw a guy that posted on the subreddit, right, that he's putting sea giants in his own priest deck to counter all of the shaman bots on ladder because they're flying the board. So he drops the sea giant first, and the guy can't respond to it. It's pretty funny.
That's so
Nice.
funny.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I want to talk about a couple more decks before we shift over to other tournaments. I want to talk about double Doomhammer and Shaman. That seemed to be one of the big hot topics because it's one of the flashiest parts of Chalky's deck list there. He opted to go for a lot of overload to start things off. He had 2 lava bursts, and then he also had a second Doomhammer in favor of Alakir, which made for some really awkward turns or even some awkward games where he couldn't get all of the charges out. But he did have opportunity to play 2 of them sometimes in the same game. What do you guys think when you're taking a step back and you look at Coast's deck building? They seem to make a really good metagame call in terms of the class selection, but then when they built their shaman specifically, they seem to be very burst oriented. Of course, being highlighted by this double Doomhammer build. Do you guys like it at all?
Yeah,
I would say
Oh, damn it! I waited.
My
For
bad.
you
I
to
should
talk.
direct this more. All right, Firebat. Start
I
things
waited
off
for
here.
you to talk, and then you didn't say
I
anything. So
waited
then
for
I went,
you.
and then you went.
I waited for you. So anyway, go ahead.
All right. Damn it! I forgot what I was gonna say. All right. So the one thing that I was really disappointed in the deck building was they chose Harvest Golems over Unbounds,
Mhm.
and they ran every single Overload card in Shaman. So I was just kind of like, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Like, why not just run the Unbounds in there? And then, well, I actually talked with Chalky afterwards, and they ended up like trying the Unbounds and liked it better after the tournament. But anyway, the double Doomhammer though is really good because like every time you draw Alakir, it just kind of sits dead in your hand. And when you're running like the double lava burst and like all of the bursts and all the removal and stuff like that, like you need the Doomhammer on 5 usually to start picking away so that Alakir actually can even finish them. So just increase your chances to get Doomhammer, and instead of playing Doomhammer or instead of playing Alakir, you can play a Doomhammer because with a Doomhammer you can Rockbiter and Lava Burst. So like I don't know, I just love the potential way more. Whereas Alakir is only good in like 4 matchups. Like
Mhm.
it's not as versatile as the Doomhammer. So that's why I like it.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing basically. Is that like Alakir, it's so hard to get out sometimes. Especially because you want to use Alakir after you've kind of made it safe for him to come out, or maybe you can set up a lethal or something. And in that instance, usually overloaded, so you can't use him with Rockbiter, or you can't throw him in the same turn as you throw down the Flame Tongue Totem because you're always like by clearing you're using overload basically. So it's really hard to get him out, and I can totally see like the Doomhammer being something that's much more viable as far as getting damage in consistently and just being a little bit cheaper and also spread out. Like if Alakir would actually be a pretty decent card if he was like 6+2 overload. Like
Huh.
I mean,
Crazy.
he's
That'd be, like,
already
nuts.
yeah. I mean,
Sounds
yeah, it'd be
quite
like
overpowered in my opinion.
I would
Well,
coin
yeah, but
Alakir
it'd be
every
so-
game.
But I mean, it would be so much better, right? So that's almost like what Doomhammer is. It's
Yeah.
has the
Yeah.
but I don't know if I agreed with the double lava burst. It just seems too clunky. Obviously, I was
right.
terrified of it when I was playing as Handlock against it because I was just gonna get bursted down. But I feel like if I felt like it was only good against Handlock. Like what else are you gonna really have the time to use that for?
Yeah, for the same reasons where Alakir might sit dead in your hand, I felt like Lava Burst did the same exact thing, where there's scenarios where you're not going to overkill and overload yourself on smaller minions and really early turns. So if you drew it early, it's just sitting there. And then, of course, there was one game I recall where Chalky drew both Doomhammers in the first like 5 cards of his deck after
Yeah.
Mulligan phase, and just
Yeah, but
just sits there dead for a long time.
I mean, if it was Alakir, it'd still be sitting there dead too.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
like, there's absolutely no difference between like the dead ratio of like Doomhammer and Alakir.
Right.
I don't really think so.
Jockey specifically mentioned that the plan was to draw only one Doomhammer every game and make your opponent feel, oh my god, he has Doomhammer every game. This guy's so lucky, without showing the second Doomhammer.
Nice.
Except you can see the bots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It
And
would only work the first time.
Yeah. Well,
one
it
thing
was
I
supposed
really
to
like.
double the chances. Go ahead, Firebat.
One thing I really like about Lava Burst though is you can use it as like removal pretty efficiently. And like what I've been doing a lot in shamans, if you're gearing a shaman to like beat some of the slower matchups, you could take out a lightning bolt and throw in a Lava Burst as the second lightning bolt and just be able to like pick off minions because a lot of minions actually have 5 health, like Cabal Shadow Priest, Sludges, Yetis, all that stuff. So it really, really actually like is a huge impact in the slower matchups because you don't need spell power for your removal to work. Because like Lightning Bolt can fall really short sometimes if you don't have anything on board. And the common strategy against Shaman, of course, is to kill all of their board. Because you don't want them to have any totems or anything. So
I kind of like that actually.
I'm
Because
not
I've been
really sure
favoring.
2 is right, but definitely one Lava Burst feels really strong if you're gearing for control meta.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, because I've been favoring cutting one lightning bolt because just having, like, in the early game it's really clunky if you're playing aggro. In the late game, if you're playing control, it just doesn't have enough reach, or it's not big enough to kill something. So I could definitely agree with that. Where having one of each is really nice because you use one for the bigger ones, use one for the smaller ones, and there's never like having two lightning bolts in your hand is like kind of just not very good usually.
It's so bad.
And then same thing with like lava burst. So I mean, I can totally see that. Having one of each.
And you never want to use a lightning bolt early because just overloading yourself early and missing totems is just like against the design of your deck.
Yeah.
It seems like people in general are cutting lightning bolt from their deck, or they're more willing to part ways with it, considering not just in the control meta, but also with how many death rattle effects. Like, if someone taunts up like a defender on Hunt a Creeper, there's still going to be 2/1/1s. He doesn't lose any power on board, just more durability, and then of course you overload, you use 2 mana. So it seems like more people are willing to cut lightning bolts, and it's interesting to see what they're choosing to replace it, whether it is Lava Burst or the Asian meta really likes Reincarnate right now as a replacement to Lightning Bolt. So
I was having some fun with the Reincarnate Injured Blade Master deck, trolling.
Yeah,
on
it's cool. Like
I
don't know. I didn't realize that if you reincarnate an Injured Blade Master as soon as you play it, it becomes a 4/7 because it's a battle cry that does damage to itself, not like an effect or something.
You ever played a Injured Blade Master into Mirror Entity and have him get a 4/7?
Oh wait, what?
Like a Mage Secret Mirror Entity, and then you play Injured Blade Master, and then don't they get the 4/7?
Oh, really?
Instead of
I've never faced that situation while playing. I don't play Injured Blade Master very often in Shaman, so I never.
The battle cry doesn't happen, so you play it against.
Well, it doesn't
the
have to be Shaman. So.
Well, yeah,
right.
In any deck, like just Priest or whatever, you play the Injured Blade Master, and they happen to have Mirror Entity out, and they get the 4/7, and then you're really sad.
It's never happened to me. I guess
Blackout says no, they don't.
They don't? I'm pretty sure. I played Injured Blade Master the other day. Because the battle cry doesn't happen.
Chat's getting
okay, well, this is an interesting debate. Right. Settle later. Right? And the loser can have Firebat's spot in the North American Finals of BlizzCon.
I'm pretty sure it happened yesterday to me.
I saw like a huge debate on this on YouTube of all places. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about one final deck before we go on to other tournaments. I want to talk about Teray's Miracle Rogue. People have seen a little bit of it in the past, and the reason why I want to talk about it specifically is I know Firebat's on the show, and not everyone's been exposed to having cards like Alex Straza, Sprint, Harrison Jones, just weird cards that you don't come to expect. And Teray's still playing Leroy as if nothing ever happened. So let's talk a little bit about why this deck is good. But then the most important thing I want to focus on is that Teray called other Miracle decks bad for running things like Sinister Strikes and Cold Bloods, etc. in place of these cards. What do you guys think about that? But Firebat, I'm going to go to you first.
All right. So what I think about all the cards in his Miracle deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the question was long. Lost track. All right, so I personally love Alex Straza and Miracle Rogue, especially after the burst nerf that changed it. I think it's just so much more versatile and so many more matchups. And that's like one of the best parts about Miracle Rogue, I think, is you can get it to cover so many things, and it's sort of like a blanket counter deck. and especially if you're going to make it ladder viable, you need to see a wide range of like things that it has to play against. And then I'm a big fan of not having any of the Sinister Strikes. Although they're really good with the cycle, they just don't do anything if you don't have the Auctioneer. So it just lowers your possible amount of dead cards. But the Sprint I really like too, because it gives you the option to hold Prep in your opening hand, which you saw him do in the tournament. Normally, holding Prep in your opening hand is like a huge risk because you have to get one of the Auctioneers, otherwise it means nothing. Whereas he has the option, he can get either of the Auctioneers, and if he gets one of those, great. Now he has the Prep with it, which makes his Auctioneer like 10 times stronger. And he can get the Sprint, and if he gets the Sprint, great. Now he can activate the Sprint and get into his Auctioneers and have a really solid Miracle turn. And then the other side of that is it's really key that he has the Sprint in there since he's running all of the minions. He has both SIs, both Earthen Rings, both like he has like the Drake and the Harrison. So he has like tons of minions. So his cycle off Auctioneer is really, really weak usually. But if he's able to hold Prep in his starting hand every single time, it guarantees if he draws the Auctioneer or his Sprint, he's definitely going to have a solid opening. So I really like the incorporation of that to fix the problem of heavy Miracle decks having weak cycle by just adding in a Sprint and changing how you mulligan your deck.
Okay.
So sorry if that was long-winded.
D2, yeah, I like it. It's a very good explanation and breakdown. So D2, is there anything to add there, or do you want to start talking about to raise comments that other Miracle decks are bad if they're running cards like Sinister Strike, etc.?
First of all, that was a really good explanation, and I agree. Yeah. And I wouldn't say they're bad, but I definitely would, like, me personally, I would be more inclined to run the deck that he's running over decks with like Sinister Strike and stuff like that because of exactly what Firebat mentioned. It's just not as consistent. If you're trying to beat certain decks, like Handlock or something, where you're trying to get behind, taunts that may be useful, but it's just kind of really situational. And I've seen a lot of, just televised matches, or even just like playing against people where they just have nothing to play because they have Sinister Strike in their hand. I guess the one thing you could say is that it can enable combos. So instead of having to throw away a Conceal or something, you could Sinister Strike and then like SI7 agent or something. But that's really the only other way that it works out, and it ends up being just like a smite that you do extra damage to the face too. So
right. Okay, so it's not as bad. D2 just likes consistency. Firebat, do you agree here, or do you feel like Teray has some merit, or is he just, is he just saying it because it was interview time and time to call out some people? What do you think?
I've heard rumors that he's a really, really nice guy, and that it was just saying like all of his DM
you can't
stuff.
confirm personally, but you've heard rumors.
I can't confirm personally, but I've only talked to him like once, and he didn't really say much, so it was just like, hi, how you doing, and sort of thing. But yeah, like he seemed like a really nice guy, but I heard that like people were egging him on to sort of be like more BM and sort of like put on the show sort of thing. So I think that's why he did it, and he was just like doing it jokingly with Tides of Time when he said that Tides of Time he like crushes him on ladder all the time and was easy game, but he didn't like laugh after it because he's like a really serious guy all the time. Doesn't show emotions very well. So he meant to make a joke, but he just didn't like laugh after it or do any like facial expressions that signaled it was a joke. So everyone thought he was just like super arrogant and like super serious and actually meant it, but he's actually like a nice guy. So
all right, so there's no harm intended whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't think there was.
To bring some light to it, he mentioned Deng Shu as one of his main practice partners, and Deng Shu like collaborates a lot with Hyped and a few other guys from Tempo Storm, so there is a connection there, and I'm pretty sure there was no bad blood or no ill will intended, at least. And of course, Tides, I've asked him directly about it. He's like, it's cool, man, whatever. He won, so he's allowed to have some fun, and he wasn't really super offended by it. We hope you guys really enjoyed the broadcast, by the way. Overall, I thought ESL did a great job just keeping the flow of the broadcast and making sure that over 2 days we didn't have the equivalent of what was in Europe, which is a 20-hour day trying to play everybody on one stream. So that was a blessing. But of course, we do recognize that some players we didn't get to see much of. Like Strifeco, for example, the first time we saw him was advancing through to the next round. But that was the first time we saw him all tournament. I'm sure people wanted to see more of his play and his decks overall. But I still think ESL did a pretty good job. If you guys are willing to agree with
Yeah, ESL did a great job. I love the ESL admins because I've been playing in the open tournaments, and that's like how I got into Hearthstone competitively was like all the open tournaments. So I know like all the ESL admins and stuff like that. So it's really cool to meet them and hang out with them because you sort of get a special bond with people that like administer all the tournaments, and then like
Mm.
you got it because you actually have to talk to them a lot because there's like constant problems all the time with open tournaments. Like you'd think everyone would follow the rules and just be polite and do everything by the book, but no. People are people are
Wow.
people.
There's a lot of dirty players online, man. People try to take credit for wins or they like
Yeah.
just inconveniently don't report and delay it for like 45 minutes. I know because I've played in my own fair share of open tournaments. And
Yeah, like
there's some
you'd think
scumbags out there.
yeah, there's a lot of scumbags.
Yeah,
Surprising.
have you ever had anyone try to report a win for themselves against you when they didn't?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
And then they're
I've had
Yeah,
that before.
I've had that, and then the guy immediately conceded the next match, so that it like screwed up the system in Zotac.
yeah.
And then they
Wow.
couldn't
So he
get
just
to it.
like ruined it for you and then
Yeah,
gave the other guy the
Yeah.
win immediately. So then like, wow.
yeah,
They
pretty
just try
much.
and
And that
like
was
mess it up as much as possible for everybody else if they lose. They're just like
yeah,
sort of
and that
like the
was
kid that loses in like chess or whatever and just like flips the table over. It's like, no, I didn't lose.
yeah, and that was the BlizzCon qualifier for the qualifier thingy, and I ended up getting to the finals of the tournament. Had to use some other guy's name the entire time. Anyway,
Wow.
different story.
That happened in what, LCQ? Or no. The Phase
Zotac.
1? Oh, no.
No,
Okay.
no,
Oh,
no,
you
no.
mean right. You mean one
To
of the
get into
open
phase
tournaments that seeded to it.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Anyway, what was I
Okay.
gonna say?
Good
Well,
old
Uh,
Pete.
those
oh
guys
yeah.
are dicks. And we'll never invite
Yeah.
them on turn two. All right?
No,
You just
yeah,
tell me the name and I'll call them out.
right. But yeah, like it was definitely like nice to not have to do 17 hours because I think I would have died considering how much jet lag there was and how much sleep I'd gotten the day before.
We
But
all would.
yeah, like some people like you said like Striveco only got to play one match on the main stage, and then people like Dear Jason and
Yeah, exactly.
they basically got to the main stage and then just immediately fell out, and didn't get to see them. The real I don't know their best play, I suppose. So
The main stage was like exhausting. Like if I had to play in like the main stage like for 20 hours I would have died because like every time after you finally like you play a match on the main stage and you like get off and like take a deep breath, you just want to take a nap. Like it takes like all of the energy out of you because you're like so in the moment and there's lights on you and cameras and all the focus and like you're trying super hard and like I don't know. For me, anyway, like every bit of energy was just like sucked out of me. So I just like crashed after every single time I played on stage. So I'm really glad it
I,
wasn't super long.
I definitely slept through Firebat hyped because I was like exhausted.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the set was fun too. The chairs were so big. You guys aren't even competing in like, the soundproof booths, where there's like usually a lot of intense like tension because you can see the crowd and they're like cheering and then like in your booth it's like quiet and soundproof headsets. Like that's super esports, and Blizzard was making
Yeah.
a big point that they wanted to be more, opponents seeing each other. They want it to be tabletop, as if you guys were playing the cards right there. So that way, as soon as it's over, you can reach over and handshake, etc. That was a big goal for at least EU and NA, of what they wanted to do with some of these broadcasts. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And of course, thanks to ESL again for putting on a fun event. And shout out to all the admins. Like Milkcast was even working the event. So
Yeah.
good stuff. Good stuff. All right, so that wraps up the America's Hearthstone Championship. We took a while to get through it, but I thought we hit some really good topics. We want to cover some of the other things around the scene too before we go to the Q&A section, which is going to be in a few minutes, where you can ask Firebat or D2 any question related to Hearthstone or not. We want to hit upon WCA once again. Last week we talked about like the half of the first day because the tournament was still going on. Did you guys get to watch any of the China tournament at all? And did you get any thoughts based off of what you saw from the Chinese players? Like, are you fearing that region whatsoever? They're generally accepted to be the strongest region after the West, which is Europe and Americas.
I personally wasn't able to catch that many of the matches. I was like really busy with like work and stuff, and there's like so much downtime on the stream. But I was able to check like some of the past broadcasts and like see some of the matches, and I was able to talk to like some of my friends that were in the event, like Kit Kats and That's Admirable and stuff like that. So I was able to like talk to them about it. But I don't know very much at all about the Chinese players, and I didn't know they were considered the strongest. I thought the general consensus that North America was stronger. So news
Well,
to me.
yeah. I was saying that the Chinese are considered the strongest region after the
Oh,
West, right? Like
yeah,
people say the West is the strongest, right? Europe is really great players,
yeah,
Americas is great players, but then like China is like the closest region to them as opposed to
yeah.
Korea, Taiwan.
That makes sense. Yeah, but I'm a little bit scared because I'm sort of like by the books, try and like figure out everything, all the counters and stuff, and they're just so weird. So like my entire style and my entire way that I prepare
Mhm.
is not gonna work. Like I need to figure out some new way to approach it because it's so different. So it's gonna be interesting.
How about you, D2?
Yeah, I had the same issues watching it because all the downtime, and it was just really, I don't know, disorganized. It seemed like, but just watching the Chinese players, like I think they're just trying to force, like they're trying to build up the Chinese players so much that they're getting a lot of weak players in the mix. I think there's definitely some strong players in there, but a lot of the weaker players are getting showcased. Like it's kind of like how kind of like the early NA or the early Hearthstone tournaments were for NA and EU when it was all just like the popular streamers, not like many of the top players. Where like some of the players that they were showing weren't actually like the best players out there, and now we're seeing more of the top players rise. Like for instance, like Titular Celestial, I think is a really good player, but people kind of lump him in with all the other players and all the other misplays that they've seen. So I think like
Right.
the fact that they're like kind of hyping up, they're making these huge tournaments and kind of not um, getting the best players per se is kind of giving the actual good players like a bad image. I think there's definitely good players in China.
So you're saying you don't think Lebo, the guy who won it all, is deserving of his 97,000 US dollars?
I didn't actually see a lot of his games.
Okay.
I think the only best of five that I saw was against Ecop when he went like nuts with the shaman. Um, but I mean I don't know, from that it didn't seem like he was like the worst player. Although he did make some like
Didn't
peculiar
seem like the
plays.
worst player. Okay. That's a great way to talk about a tournament champion. Well, how do you feel? You're not the worst champion to ever come on the stage.
There you go. Dang.
Well, the Chinese metagame has seen a lot of interesting innovations too. I asked people what they think about Magic Wind's recent reincarnate shaman. He seems to really like it, and Magic Wind's actually one of the better players in the region. Like you said, Tither Celestial also gets lumped in. We saw him at IEM Shenzhen where he lost to Amaz, but everyone was losing to Amaz that tournament, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think the Chinese players might surprise some people. People who interview me, they ask me like, "Who do you think is going to win BlizzCon, right, for the top 16?" I said it's got to be a random Chinese player that we haven't heard of yet versus someone like Quar. And I feel like the winning interview for BlizzCon is going to be super awkward, where poor Rachel once again is going to have to like talk to somebody for 15 minutes, but they don't understand English, and it's just going to be like, "Well, how do you feel?" And it's like, "Well, Hearthstone is easy. It's RNG stone, so thank you so much for 100K. I'm out. See you next year." I feel like that's what's going to happen in BlizzCon. Sorry, guys. I'm not saying you guys are going to lose badly, but that's what's going to happen.
Wow. Frodan has no faith. Please.
I'm starting to get my hopes shattered every single tournament. The person that I root for ends up no offense, Firebat, but I was really hoping
so
Hyped would get
you weren't
through.
rooting for me. What?
No, I was rooting for Hyped.
Please.
I have to. You see the shirt?
No.
You see the shirt?
Shh. Nah. Playing favorites.
All right,
Of course,
so
Hype's
just
my
don't
favorite.
don't root for us next tournament so we can get far.
Yeah,
please.
don't root for me. Because
Well,
I don't
look,
want to lose now.
happened, Firebat. I didn't root for you, and you got through.
All right, thank you. I
Exactly.
appreciate it.
That's what we're saying.
So
Don't
keep
root
it
for-
up. Just don't
to-
vote
to
for
keep
me.
not-
and I'll win.
Yeah, to keep not rooting
Yeah.
for us, we'll be fine.
Root for the Chinese guy, and then we got him.
Yeah.
Go
got
North
for
America.
I got both of you. D2, real quick, before we start transitioning away from WCA and more into other tournaments, do you feel like that you represent Japan at all? Because I know Japan has a card game scene for Magic. They were very good, and they always would be very weird about their deck construction, but at the same time, they had their place, and people respected Japanese card players. Like, can you talk about the Japanese scene a little bit? And are you involved in that at all for Hearthstone?
I'm kind of just marginally involved. But the thing is, a lot of the Japanese players all play on the NA server. So it's not really like I mean, it's not like the Chinese scene and the Korean scene because I mean they're like
Right.
totally separate. I think one of the biggest problems actually is that Hearthstone isn't in Japanese, which is unfortunate. Like
Oh,
you
it's
can,
English?
yeah, they have to play it in English, so that's kind of a problem, and Blizzard needs to get on that. But yeah, so, but yeah, so basically, all the Japanese players are playing on the NA server in English, and there's some pretty good players, but obviously not the number of players that there are in Korea and China. I mean, if you look at the Phase One qualifiers, there were like 5 or 6 Japanese players in the 128, which I think is pretty decent if you consider you
Okay.
know the obstacles they have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I was just curious because we don't really get to see much about the Japanese scene. We know that they like those kinds of games, but I wasn't sure if there were if all of a sudden there people are interviewing you because it's like, oh, we have a guy who lives in Japan and he qualifies for BlizzCon, so I thought it'd be
I
kind of
mean,
cool.
I definitely got a few tweets from in Japanese from the people who I know
Nice.
in Japan, or just like "omedetou gozaimasu," and I was like, retweet.
Ah,
But
good stuff. Favorite that star it. Yeah. All right. Gotcha. Good stuff, man. Well, hopefully the scene continues to grow in Japan, and we'll see more events also represent them too. I've met a few players in other events. Like I think there's a Japanese player named Tyson who qualified for IEM Shenzhen. And he was a pretty
yeah,
decent player.
he's
I don't know if
he's
you
like
know him at
16 or
all.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I know some of the players. There's a guy who's like 17 and he lives like an hour away from me, and he's like, I don't know. His Twitter's kind of nuts though. He's always posting pictures of like Japanese girls and shit. So I don't know. But
Gotcha. Gotcha.
anyway,
All right.
we don't need to
We'll
go on
keep
that
that Twitter
subject.
account away from Gnimsh, and that's all we need to do. Damn, shots fired. All right, let's move on to our next topic. Let's talk about a few tournaments that are happening. The first one is the Game House Cup that's happening this weekend. It's going to be a $20,000 US dollar tournament with a very unique format, and this is why I'm bringing up discussion to not only get some initial predictions on who's going to perform well, but to ask you guys what the hell is going on with this like pick one, ban two, and then like close your eyes and play rock paper scissors to see what clash you're going to face. It feels very complicated, but it's cool at the same time because a tournament with such a big prize pool on the line is willing to experiment with their format so much that's the reason why I want to tune in to see how it's going to pan out. Do you guys can either of you guys explain this format for me, and then some of your thoughts on whether or not you think it's competitively viable to like do this, or is it just a one-time thing? Either one
I
here.
guess we should. I guess we should read it for the chat, right? So it says player one bans one deck from his opponent. Player two bans one deck from his opponent. Player one picks 2 decks from among his remaining decks. Player two picks 2 decks among his remaining decks. Player one bans 2 decks from his opponent. Player two bans 2 decks from his opponent. Player one picks 2 decks from his remaining decks. Player two picks 2 decks from his decks. Player one bans one deck from his opponent. Player. Okay, I'm really confused now.
So there's
Fireback, what's
10
going on?
phases. There's 10 phases to the pick and ban phase. And then if you divide it by two players, it's just 5 things. And the most important aspect is that they're going to be having 3 bans, but they split it one in the very beginning and 2 in the middle. And then during this entire time, you're doing it to your opponent's classes. Because what happens is every player brings 9 decks to the event. So, you can bring, I think it's non-exclusive classes too. So you bring 9 decks/classes, and then you see what your opponent brings, and then you just ban one, and then they ban one, and then you kind of go through a pick and ban phase similar to Dota
Wait,
2, which how they
do
do
you
it.
get to see the deck lists or no? Just the names?
I don't believe so.
So
You just see the classes overall.
and you can only bring one of each class or no?
Yeah, as
All
far
right.
as I know.
I guess we're
Wait,
gonna see
so
a.
You can't just bring like 900 decks, and there's
I
no
know.
point. You're just banning. Oh, well, I'm gonna ban Hunter one. It's like, well, this deck only has one tracking, and this guy only has one flare. It's like, no, you can't actually do
all of the hunters.
I
that.
guess we're gonna see a lot of
Wait,
Paladin and Priest being played, and some really long 3-hour grind out Paladin mirrors. So that'll be interesting.
well, so the last ban there, that's just like the last ban on that list. It just means that the last deck is eliminated, right? Is that all that means?
Yes.
Like, I mean, they're automatically banned because like that's the last deck
Right.
out
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
game.
No, you're right. It means that you can't choose it, so it's just banned
All right,
anyway.
let's run through
Okay.
this. Here, I'll play against D2 and let's run through this ban
All right.
phase for like an
All right.
example thing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so I'll go first and I'll ban the obvious choice. I'll ban Hunter.
All right. I ban your 100 too.
All right. So that was pretty predictable. And then we pick 2 decks from our remaining decks.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So we
So,
pick
like,
2
now
decks they can't ban.
Not yet. No, you
Yeah,
pick
yeah.
2 decks from your pool of decks that haven't been banned yet. So
So
you
that
have
that I'm
every
going to
deck
play.
available to you other than Hunter.
All right. So then I would do Warlock and Rogue.
All right.
Okay,
I'll
and
go
then
Warlock
D2
and
picks.
Druid. I'll go Warlock and
Alright.
Druid.
And then we both ban 2 decks from our opponent. So
Yeah, but
would
you
I
go
go
first
first?
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I go first
Why do you
again?
get to go first every time?
Yeah, actually, that's
That's
a
a
really good
slight
question. The
advantage,
second
yeah.
player is always an advantage because you can respond to how your opponent
Yeah.
does.
So you picked. What did you pick? You picked Warlock and.
Druid.
Druid.
So then.
You're-
Alright. So how would I do this?
Wait, ban his
ban-
priest.
No,
Ban
no.
his-
I have Rogue. I'm not a ban Priest. He's definitely playing Priest and Paladin.
He's tryharding
Definitely.
so
There's
hard.
100%.
Firebat's in tryhard mode. He's like,
Wow,
no,
you don't
no
have enough
way.
spread. He's like, I did not prepare these many spreadsheets. He's
I'm
like,
thinking,
where's my Google
well, I definitely
Drive?
want Shaman gone. It's just the second one I'm not completely sure yet. I don't know.
I need to go to like
Okay.
a Hearthstone
Well, I
website
think,
to figure out this- what this-
Yeah,
So
you got
either
the
way,
idea.
the simulation taught us that this is going to be a little tricky.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be
Exactly.
tricky, but I think it could work. It's just,
I should really have known about the system because my teammates in this tournament. So
Yeah,
But,
Faramir's playing in this, and you probably
Yeah.
would like some help. Faramir's
I
a
was
cool
preparing
guy.
for BlizzCon. Okay. For BlizzCon call.
No worries. He was
Got
helping
that.
you with that too, right? I heard that Faramir helps his NA guys practice a lot. Is that true?
Yeah, he helped with the shaman deck basically.
Okay.
So,
so,
yeah.
I would ban
But he's in
Shaman
the
and
group
Mage.
with the. He finally comes out with it.
I finally
Yeah.
found out what I would do. I ban Shaman and Mage. I got a plan.
So
now.
then I ban 2, and then you pick 2, and I
Oh
pick 2. and I
gosh,
ban
we're
one.
going back.
Yeah, it makes
1,
sense.
3, 5, 7,
kinda.
8. Wait, there's only 8 decks then. Oh wait, so you get 5 decks? You get to play 5 decks?
No, well, it's
You're
Because
only
you count
banning
it,
a total.
it's 8.
guys,
like, you
guys.
pick-
I really don't know, and thankfully I'm not doing this
Sorry.
event. So I would be stuck explaining this, and then the day would be already over. Era and Show will be casting the event as far as I know, which should be fun. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, let's pick a
Okay.
few guys. Let's pick a few guys here who you think will do well. Okay. Let's pick a few guys who you
Alright.
think will do well. I looked at one guy immediately, Faramir, as a guy that I think is underrated and he'll perform pretty decently. And then I want to see Alesh do very well too, because he's also a player that I think is underrated. And Isuba's performed pretty well in the Gentleman Cup. So I think he's going to make some waves. Do you guys have any takers for underdogs that you think will surprise people?
Same Faramir, I think is really good. I think he's one of the best players in the tournament. Obviously I'm biased, but I mean, yeah. And I mean he performed really really well in the Gentleman's Cup too. Well, while he was still in Planet Key.
Right.
Planet Key, yeah.
For the Planet Key dynamics. I've stopped rooting for Reynad, by the way. I'm accepted that Faramir and Kalento is going to go in Group C. And this is where I subconsciously hope Reynad goes through, but well, I don't know. I don't know anymore.
Some of these guys I don't think I've heard of before.
I haven't heard of.
Vlasic or Soloco or.
Got no idea who that Amaz guy is. Never heard of him before.
It's just this
Yeah,
random
so how do you
scrub from
pronounce that?
Hong
It's like
Kong.
Amaze or.
Yeah, who is that?
But I think so definitely Tides and like Ecop are the favorites in the group. Even I know they're like the most famous ones, but I've heard about Kita before, and he's like, because I used to do a show where I go over like the online tournaments, and he has decent results, but he's not like overwhelming. And I've never heard of Papa Stoma. RDU I think is definitely the favorite in that group, even over
definitely.
Alesh. I mean, Alesh is solid, but I think RDU is a little better. I think Alesh and Gnimsh are kind of like near the same level, I've never heard of us. I think might have heard of Loco before actually, but
Yeah.
I forgot. And Kalento, because he is not human, is probably going to win that group. And I would say, yeah, Farmir and Reynad probably for the second spot. I think Farmir. No offense to Reynad, I think Farmir is a little better than Reynad. Just throwing that out there.
Oh, all right.
Cool.
Well,
Shots fired.
Reynad's been traveling a lot, and he's one of the first to admit that he doesn't get as much practice as he'd like to. So I would give Faramir the upper hand. He takes this cup very seriously, and he's been practicing a lot. So hopefully he can show it. And I'm not going to make any predictions for this group, but I'll say everything else I agree with too. So make sure, guys, to tune in. By the way, Ghost Gamers is doing full coverage of the event, and I believe, if I pull up my calendar here, the event's going to be starting in about 12 to 13 hours from now. So set the clocks and tune in. And of course, it'll be hosted by Viagame. I don't believe it's going to be on Twitch. So make sure you guys get the proper streaming avenues down. Okay, and with that, we're gonna do a couple of other things before we go into Q&A for Firebat and D2. So it's gonna be a couple minutes. So start asking questions in Twitch chat, and then of course Firebat D2. Start looking at the chat for any questions that you want to tackle as soon as I'm done doing some rundown here. We want to also talk about some tournaments that are happening. Dreamhack Bucharest has been announced, where there's $10,000. There's the seeds there are already the strongest players who didn't make BlizzCon, like RDU, Frezar, Gara, Ecop, Lothar, etc. It's going to be the same weekend as the BlizzCon pre-event, and it's going to be hosted in Romania once again by the same crew who did Bucharest earlier this year. So it should be a fun time. Check it out. You can find out more details at dreamhack.ro. There's also going to be Sea Story Cup 2 next weekend, which should be super fun. I'm going to be there with a lot of other fun guys, and Sea Story Cup is like the perfect laid-back environment for Hearthstone. You get to see players like dial. I'll be dialing back the filter too. Like I'll be a lot meaner, and I'll be like more with the guys in a sense. It's just like you get to see players in their organic environment, which is the fun stuff. So make sure to check out that at taketv.net. And then of course, the BlizzCon schedule is out for how the weekend will progress. So you can go to battle.net and check out all the cool stuff. There's a few panels related to Hearthstone. Cross our fingers. There better be a big announcement of some kind, whether it's an expansion or spectator mode or, something. That there has to be something for Hearthstone this year, which everyone's expecting, like maybe Legacy of the Void to be announced for StarCraft or more Heroes of the Storm stuff. But I'm expecting something big for Hearthstone as well. And that's not a confirmation, but this is just my thinking. I don't know if I'm alone in that. I feel like Blizzard has so many good things going for Hearthstone that it'd be foolish not to announce something at BlizzCon. All right, cool. I wanted to do this one last thing too. I wanted to highlight a really fun game because we're speaking of Reynad earlier, just a few minutes ago. There's a really fun game that was made in his honor where you can become legendary and you fight off all of the sniperinos. It's really funny. In fact, I want Sam to pull it up on stream to show you guys.
I clicked on it earlier. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
Oh my! It's one of the funniest things I've seen all week. So if you have an opportunity to give it a look, just search "I made a game featuring Reynad" and you get to see how you can become legendary. And with that, I want to start taking some questions, but we'll keep the video going on for a while. Do we see any questions we want to first tackle, boys?
I have done it! Behold the absolute power!
Alright, I'll start off with the question I saw. They asked me, is Vanish a legit rogue card? And I would like to say, yeah, Vanish is super legit, and I've been laddering with Mill Rogue all day. You get to check that out on my stream. I'm gonna stream probably after this some more Mill Rogue, running double Vanish, double Kidnapper, both super legit cards that everybody should play in every deck.
I mean, who knows? Maybe one day it will be a legit card and we're not making fun of it. People always made fun of Alakir when they first started playing Hearthstone, right?
Really?
I'm totally serious.
I always loved Alakir. I think Vanish is probably more likely to be something that can be played than a Kidnapper. I don't know. I don't think Kidnapper.
Dude, coin Kidnapper, the tempo play, so sick. Like disgusting.
Get a 5/3 out on turn 5.
What happens if you don't have coin though? Do you just lose 50% of your games because you don't have?
Hunter, they slam high main on 6, and you just coin Kidnapper. Easy. They're done.
Wow.
But that would be your turn 6 play. So what do you do with the 1 mana?
Oh gosh.
Oh
Chill.
no,
Like-
you bore him.
Yeah, you
You
bore
stone
every
tusk
time.
bore. Then why'd you
every
get
time?
to-
It'll hit for 2, and then you
guys are
win.
ridiculous.
Easy game.
Oh my god.
Oh.
All right, here's a question. What do you think about the card duplicate, and could you use it with heavy taunters like Sunwalkers, Belcher, in more of a mage control deck?
I think it's
yeah,
already being
Hypes.
used like that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Hype's deck. What are
Yeah.
you talking about?
Yeah, like of
So-
course, I know the answer to the question, but some people who don't follow the pro scene closely, they want to hear
Okay.
about it. So
So what do you
not
think about
everybody
duplicate?
follows Hearthstone 24/7, guys.
Sorry.
So answer the
Okay.
question.
So the answer is duplicate good card, and yes, you can use it with a heavy taunt deck.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I can tackle this one, I guess, then. So there's a mage deck that Hyped made that was oriented around getting a lot of board control and minion centric. In fact, he would play cards like Molten Giants and Ice Block, but then and Alexstrasza, so like really heavy hitting creatures, but then he wouldn't have like Fireball and whatnot because he would play more for the board and use Duplicate as a way to get backboard control with things like Spellbutcher. It's very interesting, and it's on Tempo Storm's website if you want to check it out. All right, here's another question by Sneeze7. Spectral Knight looked incredibly strong a while back, but it only had a niche spot in a semi-aggressive Druid deck. What are your thoughts on the card?
Spectral Knight it's pretty much best in Druid at the moment. I think there's going to be spots where people can use it in other decks as well. It's in particular it like demolishes like stuff like Rogue and Hunter when they can't deal with it right away. The problem is that the reason why it didn't get as popular as people thought it would be is because you like a lot of decks got way too fast, and the way to deal with those decks is to use Sludge Belcher. And if you have Sludge Belcher, then you don't have enough room for Spectral Knight. So the fact that Sludge Belcher is so good kind of made Spectral Knight a little bit worse because you couldn't put it in at the same time.
I've seen like a lot of newer decks coming out like just recently over the last like day or two. Like there was a Control Warrior by Just Saying that ran Spectral Knights and Sludge Belchers that was able to fit it in by taking out shield blocks and shield slams. So I still think there's like
Whoa.
new development coming in with how
That's
to
cool.
like fit in the Spectral Knight, and I don't think it's a card that's been completely figured out yet. So it's going to be interesting to see how it like finds a place.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think there's definitely room to like run it in, and because it's such a unique card, like sometimes it can be better than like a 6-drop if you think about it because of the way that it basically doesn't interact. Like for Prismatic Cup, I ran a warrior with double Sludge Belcher, double Spectral Knight as well. I didn't cut the removal though, but I mean it worked pretty decently.
Okay. Well, it's interesting to see if it continues to develop that down that line. I don't know about cutting Shield Slam. I can maybe understand Shield Block, but very interesting. Okay. Firebat, you get a question from David5566. He says, what do you think about the viability of Freeze Mage in the current meta?
Tournament meta, I think it's amazing, and I thought the list that Hype played was like super super cool. Even though it's like something that's been like brought back, I think the way that he adapted it for this tournament meta was like really really cool, and I really loved the list like a lot, and had fun like playing around with it a little bit. But as far as ladder goes, it's going to be really difficult to find a ladder environment that makes it super viable again. So, because there's just so many Naxxramas cards, and Hunter being a thing that just like really like screw it up and make you have to build it a very specific way. So the more like an archetype of a deck gets locked down into a certain way that it has to be built, the less viable I think it's going to be on ladder because it's so predictable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the same way too. Freeze Mage has some of the most lopsided matchups in Hearthstone.
Yeah.
Like some matchups it can't lose, and some matchups it just can't win.
Yeah, so not sure about ladder.
All right. Hyde Hill 1 asks, what are your thoughts on Zombie Chow in Warrior, especially with Cruel Taskmaster? Guessing he says that this is really good for early game board control. What do you think of
D2? Yeah, people have been experimenting with Zombie Chow, like because people like to use what's the thing, the Unstable Ghoul, and you can use that in place of, or I guess if you put both into it, it's a little bit it'll just flop versus other control decks. But I mean, it's really nice to just get it out in turn one and be ahead tempo wise of your opponent, and then you just shut down any Undertaker shenanigans. So I think it's good. Obviously, it's not the greatest card once you get to the mid to late game, but it can kind of help smooth out your curve, especially because a lot of the warrior cards are clunky. So yeah, it's fine if you feel like you need more stuff to do, or you need something to get out against aggro.
Can I go way in depth on this question and make everybody confused and not know what I'm talking about?
Do it.
Only if you can
Go
use
for
some
it.
spreadsheets as part of diagrams.
So Control Warrior, like the way that you can build it and the way that I've seen it being built a lot, and to fit in Zombie Chow. Zombie Chow is a minion drop as opposed to a utility drop, whereas cards like Whirlwind are weaker on turn one than Zombie Chow, but are also strong for early game presence or tempo swing pushes. Same with like Slam. But Slam, Whirlwind, and all these utility cards like and Fiery War Axe all have constant value throughout the game. So you can put a number value to how much that card's going to be worth on turn 1, and it's going to be worth just about the same on about turn 10. Whereas Zombie Chow, on turn 1, it's going to have an extremely higher, like way higher value than Slam or something like this. But as the game progresses, all of the on-curve minion drops that are just vanilla cards for stat-wise have a degrading value as they expire. So as they get further into the game past their point where they're optimal drop for curve, they lose value, like in comparison with the amount of tempo they gain. So that's the sort of like take on it. So if you're adding Zombie Chow, you can't cut Whirlwind, you can't cut like Slam and those cards because they serve a completely different purpose. You'd have to cut one of the early game things like Fiery War Axe or something that serves the same exact purpose that lowers its value and degrades its value throughout the game. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of early game drops that'll, as the game goes on, are just going to be completely dead draws later.
Sure. And disrupts the flow of the deck.
So pretty much, I would say Unstable Ghoul, right? You just get rid of Unstable Ghoul.
Unstable Ghoul is something that you could cut for it. All of those like that are actually like minions compared to the utility because they're just a totally different category and you have to scale them completely differently. That's why when making like warrior decks and heavy control decks, I think you have to have 2 different curve charts. So...
Okay, interesting. TFT Maeve asks, after all the talk about Undertakers and Hunter, what about Mad Scientist? No, there's no card disadvantage and tempo play in one card. Doesn't it seem too strong?
It's very strong, but it's not like. I mean, there's downsides to Mad Scientist. If you draw your secrets first, it gets a lot weaker. If you run out of secrets, then it gets a lot weaker. It's like really weak, obviously. So there's a lot of downsides to Mad Scientist, and you have to like accommodate. So, I mean, I doubt he's going to be nerfed. I think they're just going to stick with him as just a really strong card that can really use with 3 classes.
But I think they need to nerf him or change him somehow because it limits the new cards they can develop. Like if they wanted to develop new secrets for other classes, they can't develop like a 5 costing secret because Mad Scientist exists. So I think it is actually like really poor card design on Blizzard's side because it just adds another variable into all of their balancing changes. So like whenever they make a new secret, they have to be like, is this going to be OP with Mad Scientist? Like that's a new check that they have to do based on like how the card is designed.
Sure,
so
that's interesting.
I think it needs to be changed eventually as more cards get developed.
For now, it's still somewhat cool to have.
It's definitely really cool, but I don't know.
We got a question to ask. Let's go ahead.
I was just saying, like, you really think it's gonna be a 5-minute secret? That'd be insane.
I mean, but you want to have the options available, right? You don't want to be able to. You don't want to limit your possible card pool. That's just silly. If they keep adding cards that limit the new cards they can make, eventually they'll get the game and state into just like a rut where they can only make certain types of cards. So that would be very silly.
All right, here's a fun question that I'm coming up with on the spot. If Blizzard was to make a 10 mana secret, what do you think that card would do?
10 secret.
Of course, you can't ever make one because a Mad Scientist would be able to get it. But if considering Mad Scientist wasn't in the game, what do you think would be a fair and balanced 10 mana secret?
It's like if you attack the wrong minion, you lose the game or something. Just like make it completely RNG.
Wow. It's like Snake Trap, but you up the stakes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Russian roulette, Hearthstone.
Huh.
Got anything, Firebat? You know what? Sit on it. Here's another
Yeah,
question, an
thanks, yeah.
actual question from the chat. They said, "What do you guys think about Razor's a charge warrior deck here that he's been posting, where he does a bunch of Warsong Commander stuff?"
Where is it?
I don't know if I have it on me directly, but Razor plays like Frothing
Yeah.
Berserker, and he plays Warsong Commander, and then Unstable Ghoul, and then
Yeah.
goes for like major combo damage. I'm gonna link it to you in chat right here.
Okay.
He played it in phase 1, I believe. So of the BlizzCon qualifier.
Any
So
opinions
he's
on
really
it?
confident in it.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
So good for him, but not for me. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I, I mean, I've never actually played around with the deck too much. Like I know friends of mine have been trying it about a lot, like way earlier. It's probably developed more since I've last seen it, but when I saw it, it was working. Like when it got what it needed to, it worked really well. But it had a lot of struggles with some like removal spells and stuff because it could just like run out of steam really, really quickly when faced with AoE removals. So in that aspect, it was like a little weak, but obviously that's not the niche it's trying to counter. So I think it's really innovative and it's really cool that people are trying to find new and different ways to approach the Hunter matchup and the Zoo matchup and stuff like that.
All right. Good stuff. Well, I guess since Firebat had the experience, he can comment. And D2, I guess now you have a new deck to try out for fun. Let's see how it works for you. Vang5474 asks, with decks becoming more balanced, do you think we should revert tournament forming back to no bans? This is an interesting thing because as soon as the event ended, I asked about like 6 or 7 players, like, do you think you performed better or worse with the ban format? And a lot of them said they think they performed worse, that they would have preferred no bans. What do you guys think?
I love band formats. Don't take band formats away. The band formats I do way, 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 way better in. Like, I
Wait,
don't know.
wait,
I feel
wait.
like you put more control in the player. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not only like because there's RNG in Hearthstone, right? But like it allows you to make decisions that aren't like RNG based at all, and there's draw it's not affected, and you can have a strategy going into it. So it just gives another element of depth to the entire game. So I really like the depth, and I really like even the Via game format sounds crazy, but if I was playing in that, I'm
Right.
sure I would like bust my ass and figure out some way to try and capitalize off the format. So I really think like adding new formats, keeping things interesting is just shows a new depth of skill for the players and makes them have to play even better. So even though the fans don't get to see that side of the game, I think it's really, really interesting. And for the people that really follow the game and read up on about it and see all the articles about how people like their different strategies in the ban phase, really appreciate it. So I think it just makes the game more skill intensive, and I really like it.
Rock
Yeah,
and roll. What
I
about you, D2?
I do like the ban system, but I think it's the person who asked the question has a point that if you had tournaments now without the ban, that would be kind of an interesting. I mean, it would be like it wouldn't be as bad as it was before. Like before the ban system started becoming popular, it was just like all Miracle Rogue, and then you just play Miracle Rogue and win tournaments. And now you can just play. There's all these different counters that you can do, and then all these different mind games that you can still have even without the bans. So I think going back to not having bans wouldn't be the worst thing. One thing I wanted to like have introduced is maybe having like more like sideboarding and less having to have different classes, because at the moment you actually can't play in a tournament with both Handlock and Zoo unless you're playing like the Korean 9 deck format. So just not having two different archetypes from the same class available is a little bit of a downside right now, I would say. And then maybe you could have like a tournament where you only pick one class and you just have all these different archetypes of that class. But I don't know. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. But of course, no one knows how to do it correctly. So for now, it'd be like, yeah, it'd be cool, but without breaking Hearthstone and making it something it isn't. Like sideboard is still like a very interesting conversation to have.
Yeah,
But people need to try and experiment with it too. So everything is speculation until then. Let's see. We have a time for a couple more questions. I had a good one. Oh, that's right. Fluffy Bird asks, should Sludge Belcher be nerfed to something like 3/4, or do you feel like it's in a good spot and it's just a really annoying card? This is a question that's often asked because cards like Novice Engineer was nerfed because it was auto include in every deck as a 1/2 draw card, and it was strictly better than Loot Hoarder, unless I guess you're playing it with Undertaker now. Does Sludge Belcher's position as a very versatile card and very strong? Does it warrant a nerf at all, in your guys' opinion?
I don't think it warrants a nerf at all. I think like on 5, if you have a 5-drop to combat it, most of the time you're gonna have a 5-drop that trades favorably with it. Like even the 5/4s, like Harrison Jones or whatever, trade favorably with it. So there's just like so many things that you could play that on 5 deal with it. So it's just really there to counter the aggressive decks, and it serves its role really well. So I mean, you can't just nerf a card for serving its role. But in the control mirrors or whatever, like even Stranglethorn Tiger up against a Sludge Belcher, and you're just like, crap, my Sludge Belcher's dying for free. Like, what am I going to do? Or Lotheb up against it. So, yeah, I think it's in a really good spot and serves the purpose that they're intending. So I really like the design of it.
Sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's not. I mean, you can't just nerf every card that's good. And it's not like I haven't really been in a situation where Sludge Belcher completely. I mean, it's won games before, but in an indirect fashion. It wasn't just that just I had the Sludge Belcher and therefore I won. It was because I had Sludge Belcher and I put it down on this turn and I had this setup and it was this situation. That's why I won. And like Firebat said, when you like, it's always going against Lotheb anyway, and you just feel sad when that happens. So
Yeah.
it's definitely not like it's not gonna just win games by itself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you mentioned Harrison Jones being a good counter. Well, what about Captain Greenskin and Hunter, huh? Maybe that's like a good response to the Sludge Belchers. What do you think, D2?
Exactly. If you have the Captain Greenskin out there, you can just so you have the Captain Greenskin, and then wait, I think I lost my train of thought. You have but you'd have to have the Captain's Greenskin already out, so you can't buff. I don't know. I'm confused. Anyway, Next question.
No worries. All right. Let's see. This guy really wants to know. Calithrion asks, "Are there any counters to Zoo?"
Yeah, Hunter. Hunter counters Zoo. Hunter is like very easily counters Zoo, and then you can tech Priest to counter Zoo, but that's a bit trickier. And then D2's Shaman had a very favorable matchup against Zoo. So, I mean, you just got to look at why Zoo is strong. And if you can think of why Zoo is strong, how Zoo takes the board early, then you can think of easy, simple counters. Like, it's only like 4 or 5 tech cards. So.
Yep.
Okay.
And also the Freeze Mage, too, right?
And the Freeze Mage, yeah. I mean, Zoo has tons of counters. Like, people just weren't bringing them because I don't know if they didn't expect it or they just thought that, like, they could do a soft counter of it and be fine. But definitely a scary deck just because of the nature of the deck and how it can function. It has like one of the highest consistency to power ratios. So it's like, because it's like 84%, like the one that I brought, 84% of the time you're going to curve out 1, 2, 3, 4. So 84% of the time you're going to get like the AKA nuts. So
very exact percentages.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Gorlock Mad Skills asks, "What do you think about laddering as Rogue on ladder right now? How viable is Rogue?" I'm guessing it's going to be Miracle Rogue because the aggressive Rogue is not very viable at all for many reasons. But the main one is that there's just way too many Death Rattle minions, and it's phased out in terms of power. It still can take games off of stuff, but for the most part, it's not as consistent as you like it. But what about Miracle Rogue, D2?
I think it's perfectly fine. I mean, if, for instance, you have like hunters that are, I mean, obviously hunters are rampant on the ladder, and so is Zoo. So you just build your Miracle Rogue to beat those. I mean, obviously, the Death Elements have made it a little bit harder for Rogue, but they can definitely pull it off. And in particular, if you're playing Hunter, just tech in a couple of heals, and make sure and then maybe like you put 2 fan knives instead of 1. Put more of the like standard move that you see, instead of being greedy and putting minions, and should be fine.
All right, good stuff. Firebat, you want to comment on that, or do you feel like D2 covered everything?
I just want to add that like there's other forms of Miracle Rogue that work too, man. Like the double vanish, double kidnapper, stone tusk board Miracle Rogue. It's been doing
Double
work.
Stone
Like,
Tusk Boar.
no, just
Okay.
one Stone Tusk board. Double Kidnapper though.
Right.
And
Oh, of
great
course.
deck.
How could I mess that build up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh,
everyone
what?
knows that.
of
God.
course. It's
Um,
a pretty common archetype that you can find on ladder all the time. So
I'm sick of that deck. I don't know about you.
yeah, I mean it's getting pretty old. Really needs a
No
nerf.
This is an interesting question. Abysm? I think that's how you say it. He asks, what legendaries do you think are underrated? I guess we'll just pick one. What's an underrated legendary card in your opinion?
Captain Greenskin, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Captain Green. Yeah. D2 used him in his 100 deck. I don't know if that was a game-winning move by any means. I think you still lost the game you played Captain Greenskin, but it was cool
Yeah.
to see it in there.
It was kind of like I was a little behind him. Tempo. Like if you're ahead in tempo, so I guess in that sense he's kind of a win more card, but it helped. I mean, it kind of helps you finish out the game with him because it's such a nice thing, I guess, to be able to you get a solid body on the board and you get to upgrade your weapon and like it's like basically upgrade plus a body and you're just sacrificing. Like if you think of a 5/5 for 5 as like a normal body, then you just sacrifice 1 health in order to get upgrade, which is an exact with another card. So.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Firebat?
Alright. The most underrated legendary I'd probably have to say is like Baron has kind of fallen out of favor for warriors a lot lately, but I really think it works well cleaning up like the death rattles and all that stuff. And I'm pretty sure like a good warrior deck with Baron could do a lot of work, or Baron and other things. Like I think it's like its effect is like crazy powerful, and it has not seen that much experimentation. So I'd like to think there's some way people could really make that work in other classes besides warrior and have like a huge impact, especially for cleaning up all the death rattle stuff.
The most underrated legendary, in my opinion, for tournament play is Nose Dormu. Because what you do is you innervate her out, and then you just watch as players like Lothar and Trump have no idea what to do. They're like, oh my god, I have to play
Strife Grow.
Art Strife Grow, Ray 9.
Life coach, yeah.
Yeah.
Life coach would just like concede.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, maybe it'll happen one day, maybe it won't. Maybe if you lowered her cost slightly and then maybe nerfed her stats. But I think it'd be cool to see Hearthstone play a little quicker if like the stakes were higher, you know. All of a sudden it's just, you know, game 5 and then you have to play like a much faster game pace because Norzum on the board. It'd be cool.
Couldn't Norzum be 8 mana? That wouldn't be unreasonable, right?
Yeah, 8/8 for 8.
8/8 for 8.
Right?
Yeah, and you know, make the game bug out like crazy. I think that's something Blizzard's scared about because Nose Dormu actually had a lot of bug problems when Hearthstone first came out because of like the timer and like the weird stuff and the board like shift. Yeah. Cool stuff. All right, let's take one or two more questions before we wrap this one up. Beyond asks, what about raising the maximum HP to 35 as a counter to the mindless all-faced kind of decks? You know, I'm going to revise this question instead of like a specific number. You know what? Like in Magic, for example, you're not allowed. You can go above the maximum health, so to speak. There is no maximum health. You start at 20, but then you just keep going up if you want to heal yourself. And Hearthstone capping at 30. You know, some people like that, some people don't like that. What are your thoughts about perhaps being able to go over 30 for classes?
That would make Priest significantly better. Like the Priest hero power would just be better than the Warrior's hero power for the most part, aside from like Shield Slam's impact. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be fine because Priest is already like not the most consistent thing, but that's not going to improve its consistency, just increase its power. So I'm not a big fan of like allowing healing above 30. I think it's fine the way it is done that. But increasing the overall life pool, I don't agree with that either. I think they've done so much nerfs to burst already that it's like fine actually at 30. Like maybe back when like there was already tons of burst in the game, it would have been fine. And maybe for like if you're just trying to make ladder experience more enjoyable and have longer games, I guess. But for tournament play, I think it's balanced the way it is at 30. think it's like absolutely fine. There needs to be checks and balances in the game. Otherwise, certain types of decks are always going to be like better. And right now, they're just. I think there's a really close balance between aggro and control and mid range and how they all keep each other in check. So I really like the way it is.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. I think it disrupts the balance too much. D2, do you want to chime in on that at all?
Not a whole lot. Just, I mean, pointing out that if you change the how much, like the amount of health that you have to change like so many cards because, you know, obviously they've done so much testing as far as, you know, what cards work and like how they interact with each other and how your health interacts with that. So basically, I mean, I feel like the game would pretty much like break if you change the health totals. Like it would be so detrimental in ways you can't really think of, you can't even really imagine unless you played with it.
Sure. Makes sense to me. Let's take a couple more too. Here's Fujiyama Crest. He asks, is an Inner Fire Priest deck possible? What minion gets the closest to serving the deck purpose? Stormwind Knight or Shade of Naxxramas?
Did you say Inner Fire?
Yeah, the Inner Fire Priest Dream. Well, I mean, Priest is already an inconsistent class for the most part because of so many other cards are like, just their like overall game plan and how they develop most archetypes are like they have an inconsistent fashion. They don't have too much draw. So it'd be really hard to make a Inner Fire Priest deck work at above 75% of the time. So if you were going to go for that dream, though, my personal opinion would be go with the Lightwell because you got to go big or go home. So if you're gonna make it work, you have to kill someone with a Lightwell. Like that should be the design going in. But I've never.
No. You're not dreaming big enough. What you have to do is play Doomsayer and then silence it.
Oh, the Doomsayer.
Then Divine Spirit. Yeah.
Frodan's got it.
No. What you do is you play Doomsayer and then Wailing Soul, and then you use Divine Spirit and then Inner Fire as the combo. But of course, you're weaving in stuff like Temple Enforcer and whatnot.
And then in the aggro matchups, you just let the Doomsayer go off for control.
Exactly.
Sort of like two different styles of play. Oh my gosh, the theory crafting. It's all coming together.
Put some Death Lords in there, put some Mortgage Warders in there.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah, Death Lord is actually really powerful. Oh my god.
And then you run like double silence with your Auctioneers, so you could get the Miracle Cycle going on.
Ah, yeah. And then just throw in some Ancient Watchers there because you have silence anyway as a bundle.
Oh my god.
Here we go.
Well, if you have Death Lord, you don't even need run silence because they'll silence it for you because it's just in the way, right?
I guess.
So.
That's true.
The dream.
The way you actually finish out that deck is Crazed Alchemist because you have so many like high health creatures like Mokushan Warrior, Ysera and stuff, and Malygos, and then you just switch the HP, and it's as if you have Inner Fire. So
that could actually work. Frodan making new decks.
There you go. You can keep that one Firebat and post it on Reddit. I don't care.
I'll hit #1 legend with it and then post it on Reddit. Be like,
now all you have to do is win from rank 2 to rank 1. And then you say, I got #1 legend with this deck, and you post it. And of course, you're feeding the masses what they want to hear. Like, oh my god, the metagame is so diverse.
Yeah. That'd be sick.
All right, cool. That's pretty much it. I don't know if you guys have any other questions you want to tackle, but if you do, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, we're going to thank everybody for tuning in. It's been a real fun one this week. There's still coaching going on at iHeartU, even though a lot of players are traveling and whatnot. If you just go to iHeartU.com/coaching, use the coupon code on the overlay, you can get a nice 10% off your coaching session if you just use that coupon code at the bottom of your screen. Also, the RSS feed, the iTunes URL, the YouTube VODs are all being moved right now into the Nerdsy Network. So we want to let you guys know that it's not in the usual place. Make sure to look for it once again at iHeartU.com. You'll be able to find everything. And finally, we want to give final shout outs and thank yous with the players. Firebat, why don't you go first?
Shout outs to whoever I want.
Yep.
So yeah. All right. Shout outs to all my fans, especially the ones that came over from the stream. Really appreciate all of you guys. And all the people I met at, what's that thing called? BlizzCon Qualifier. Thanks to all you guys. And, it was really cool hanging out with everybody. Got to sign a bunch of stuff, shake a bunch of hands, take a bunch of pictures. And met D2 there. He's really cool. Thanks to him. And then Twisted and all the other people I met there. And then shout out to Yeah, shout out to Frodan, met him there. He's really cool. Shout out to Meltcast, met him there. Basically everybody that is at there. I'm taking too long already, but shout out to all of you guys, and shout out to Stone Tuskbor. And I'll pass over to D2.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for everyone who saw me misplay horribly and still win.
It's just, dude, it was like 100,000 people. Don't worry about it, man.
Just 100,000 people.
Just 100,000.
But yeah, thanks for the guys who actually supported me and didn't talk trash. And shout out to all the people who, again, at the tournament, you, Firebat, Frodan, the rest of the players. I don't want to name them all. I have to basically shout out to the sponsors of DKMR as well. So like Hark2P.com, Waypoint Media, Gunner, Make Me a Dragon, Hearthstone players. Some of those are partners, but anyway, yeah. And follow me. It's on the screen.
Yeah, all the social media is available right under the players' cam, so make sure you guys check them out for follow-up, especially since they are your North American finalists for BlizzCon later this year. As for me, shout out to Temple Storm, the best team in Hearthstone, bar none. They're going to be playing this weekend at the Metagame Cup.
I don't know.
Oh, Firebat! I don't even see Copenhagen Wolves anywhere. You're not even practicing with Copenhagen Wolves, so there you go. We can start. We can finish this discussion later. We can finish
the best team to not have any representatives at BlizzCon.
Yeah, exactly.
That is true.
You were absolutely correct there. We have that category locked down.
Hands down, you guys got that one.
Yeah, that's ours and ours alone. Shout out to the people who made it out to the Hammerstein Ballroom on Monday. I'm so grateful that we had as many people as we did because it's Monday. There's no reason why they should be 12 hours at a venue watching Hearthstone, but they were. The fans were awesome. And of course, even the other people who made it out too, like Nadia and Celeste were at the event. That was really cool for them to come all the way from wherever they were to hang out with us. So that was awesome. Also, shout out to the iHeartU guys, Sam for doing the production today, and Simon for coordinating everything. And hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember, you guys can go to iHeartU.com to find all the new guides, news, and of course, find out more about their King of the Hill. Things like Tabletop will be returning as soon as Admirable fixes his goddamn PC. This has been Turn 2, episode 38 with Frodan, Firebat, and D2. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.